Hey guys, welcome back to another one of my videos. Today we're going to talk about C++ again, some C++ fundamentals. Specifically, we're going to talk about the while loop and the do while loop. If you like the video and if you learned something new, please don't forget to subscribe and like. Thank you. Enjoy the video. So let's go ahead and get started talking about C++ while loops. The while loop, as you can see, is constructed with the while keyword here. In parentheses, there's going to be the condition that you're evaluating to continue the loop. In this case, we have the loop continuing as long as the number variable is less than 30. And in each iteration of the while loop, you can see the very last thing we do is iteration. We add 1 to the value of the number variable. So each time this while loop increments, or each time this while loop goes around, there's basically going to be an increment of the number variable. And once it gets up to 30 and past 30, this while loop is no longer going to be executed. That's basically how this condition reads. So basically what happens is that we're starting out the number at 20 and we're incrementing it by 1 until we get up to 30. And each time within that while loop, we're also printing out the current value of number, and we're just skipping a line to keep our output easy to read. So let's go ahead and build this and run it and see what happens. What we should get is the number 20 printed out, and then we should get number 21, 22, 23, and so on, all the way up to 29, because 29 is the last number. That is technically the last whole number that's technically less than 30. So let's go ahead and run this and see if that's what we get. So it looks like we got what we were expecting. So this while loop is working correctly. Hi guys, and while I'm on this topic of while loops in C++, I did want to make an important point. The examples I'm giving you, they're just simple iteration examples where the condition is basically until the number reaches a certain value or whatnot. But ideally, when you're dealing with situations where you already know how many iterations you're going to have for a certain loop, it's ideal to use for loops in C++ versus the while loops. For these examples, I have all of these in one file, just to make it easier to shoot this video to show you guys. So I'm just going to comment out this one, and we're going to move on to the next example. So now in this next example, as you can see, I have a number variable. Now it is set to 50. And we have a while loop that basically says, as long as the number variable is less than 60, we want to continue executing this while loop. Inside this while loop, a couple of things are happening. On the first line, as you can see here on 24, the first thing we're doing is we're cout. We're printing the console, the number, and we're skipping a line. The second thing that we're doing is we're actually increasing the value of the number variable. And we're not increasing it by 1 like we did up here in the previous example. Instead, we're increasing it by 2. So each time this while loop goes around, we're increasing the value of the number variable by 2. But we're also printing out the current value of number to the console. So if we were to run this, we would expect to get 50 printed out, and then all the numbers increasing by 2 all the way up to 58 because that is less than 60. But let's see if we get what we're expecting. Let's go ahead and build this. Let's run it. 50, 52, 54, 56, 58. So as you see, we can do some pretty cool things with while loops. Let me go ahead and comment this one out. Okay, and let's look at the third example that I have here. In this example, it's not a traditional while loop. We're actually using something different. It's called a do while loop. The difference between a do while loop and a while loop is essentially that the do while loop will execute whatever code is within the do while loop at least once before it evaluates to see if the while condition is true. So what that basically means is that no matter what number you're evaluating in the while, you're going to execute the do while loop code at least once in the program. This is going to be really good for things. Say that you're getting input from a user and you know that you want to ask them for the input at least once. And depending on if you get the appropriate input, you may ask for this input again. So for this example, we're asking for the person to basically enter their first name. So we're going to ask it at least once on the start of this program. So we're going to ask them, we're going to see out, enter your first name. Then we're going to get that first name and assign it to the first name variable. Then once we exit out of this while loop, we're going to see out, we're going to print out the first name that the user entered. So let's go ahead and build this and see if it's working. All right, let's go ahead and run it. Enter your first name. So I'm just going to enter my first name here, Christian. And it looks like it's working correctly. So as you can see, can't type anything else here. So this, it has exited the do while loop and it's gone to line 41 where it's printing out what I entered, which is my name, Christian. So that seems to be working perfectly. Some things to note here, in this code, I explicitly assigned the first name string to an empty string. But in actuality, that's not completely necessary because by default, if you were to, for example, not initialize it to any value, C++ will assign it an empty string by default. But for explanatory purposes, I went ahead and assigned this to an empty string. But what I'm trying to say here is basically how this do while is working. It's saying, ask the person for their first name as long as the first name is not equal to an empty string. And the last example I have for you guys is, it is another do while loop, but in this case, I'm not asking for a string to be inputted by the user. Instead, I'm asking for a integer to be inputted by the user. And I'm saying in this do while loop that I want to ask them this question and also ask basically for input at least once. And then depending on what they enter, I may repeat this question and the request for input. So I'm saying as long as the height in inches is not, as long as the height in inches is still equal to 0, which is the default value here, I want to continue asking this question. And I'm actually going to do this. I'm going to execute this with some inputs that will make it go multiple times so you can see how a do while loop operates. Let me go ahead and build this. Okay, so it's asking me to enter my height in inches. Let's say for whatever reason I chose to enter 0, it would ask me again because as my condition says, it says while height in inches is equal to 0. So I can keep entering 0 and it'll keep asking me that question until I enter something other than 0. So let's enter anything other than 0. And what it should do is it should accept that, it should exit the do while loop, and it should print out whatever I entered, which is what it does. So this is a really simplified version of what you can do for input in C++ using do while loops. In actuality, you probably end up adding more to this to maybe handle different situations, like if the user, for example, entered something that wasn't an integer, entered something like maybe entered a string or a symbol or something like that that wasn't even an integer. And you may even have some type of, you probably would have some type of exception handling or something like that for user input. But I just want to show you this to you guys as an example to kind of show you how do while loops work and how they always execute at least once before considering the condition. I hope you guys learned something new. If you have any recommendations for improvement, or if you have any suggestions for future content, something you would like to learn about, please drop a comment below. If you learned something new, give me a thumbs up, give me a like, and please subscribe. Thank you.